Hi, welcome back to Marriage is Not the End. Today's story might make a lot of people's hearts tighten, because it's about one of the emotions we know best and fear the most, being unseen. Have you ever felt like this? In a relationship, you try your hardest. You give everything, shrink yourself smaller and smaller, hoping that by being obedient and understanding you might earn just a little bit of attention. But in the end, you realize the other person never really saw you at all. Your existence was nothing more than a piece on their chessboard, useful when needed, disposable when not. Today's story comes from a listener named Olivia. She wrote that after the divorce, she thought she could finally start a new life. But fate decided to play a cruel joke on her, because outside an obstetrics clinic, she ran into her ex-husband. It was October in New York. On the Upper East Side, the sycamore leaves had fallen across the sidewalks, and the wind carried that distinct chill of late autumn. Olivia had just walked out of the clinic, gripping the pregnancy test report in her hand. 8 weeks. She looked down at the paper, the corners of her lips lifting without her realizing it. The timing of this child felt just right, 1 month after ending her 3-year marriage, and just after she had finally met someone who truly understood her. She was still thinking about how to tell Ethan the good news when she looked up, and froze. Alexander Stone was standing less than 10 feet away. He looked exactly the same, a tailored dark gray suit, the cufflinks she had given him 3 years ago. No, the ones she had given him as Mrs. Stone for his birthday. Beside him stood his assistant, Jason, whose perpetually expressionless face twitched ever so slightly when he saw Olivia. Instinctively, Olivia tried to shove the pregnancy report back into her bag. Too late. Alexander's gaze locked onto the paper in her hand like a hawk. Slowly, it moved upward until it met her eyes. "What a coincidence," he said, his voice low and utterly devoid of warmth. Olivia nodded and tried to walk past him. But Jason stepped forward and blocked her way. "Miss Shin," Jason said, still using the title she had lived under for 3 years, one that now sounded especially grating. "Mr. Stone's patience is limited. You should know by now that he despises these kinds of tasteless tricks." Olivia blinked, confused for a moment before realizing what he meant. She glanced down at her abdomen, then at the wrinkled pregnancy report in her hand. Suddenly, she felt like laughing. "You think this is some kind of scheme to tie him down?" Jason didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. A recently divorced ex-wife, less than 3 months after the divorce, already 8 weeks pregnant. The timing was too perfect, the motive too obvious. What else could it be? Olivia took a deep breath and pulled out her phone, ready to show them Ethan's photo. But Jason raised a hand to stop her. "Miss Shin, that's unnecessary. Mr. Stone takes bloodlines very seriously. He won't allow some unclear child to disrupt the life he shares with Miss Sophia. If you still don't understand your place, Mr. Stone wouldn't mind reminding you." Olivia's fingers paused around her phone. Sunlight filtered through the sparse leaves overhead, glinting off Jason's glasses. Following his gaze, she looked across the street. At the corner, a black Bentley was parked. The rear window was rolled halfway down. Alexander's sharp profile was visible inside, watching the scene with cold indifference. He was waiting for her to react the way she used to, pale, panicked, overwhelmed. Control was woven into his bones. And her pregnancy was yet another challenge to that control. Olivia slipped her phone back into her bag and let out a slow breath. "Please tell Alexander," she said calmly, as if commenting on the weather, "I have no interest in experiencing that feeling again. I have plans for my life. The whole mother rises in status because of her child routine is outdated." She paused. "This really is my fiancé's child." Then she turned and walked away, leaving the black Bentley and the man behind her. But she knew this wasn't over. Sure enough, 3 days later Jason appeared at her apartment door. "Miss Shin, please come with me. Mr. Stone wants to arrange a paternity test." Olivia looked at him and suddenly felt exhausted. She had thought that after the divorce she would finally escape that world. But in Alexander's eyes, she would always be a chess piece he could move at will. "Fine," she said. "But I'm bringing a sample from my fiancé." Jason's glasses flashed faintly, but he said nothing. They scheduled the test at a private clinic in downtown Manhattan. When Olivia arrived, she saw not only Jason, but Sophia Chen. Sophia was Alexander's first love, the woman he had kept in his heart for 10 years. Olivia had met her once before, shortly before the divorce. Sophia had just returned to the country and asked to meet at a cafe near Central Park. She wore a simple white dress and almost no makeup. Her expression tried to project innocence untouched by the world, but the calculation and weariness in her eyes were impossible to hide. Meanwhile, Olivia, after 3 years in a wealthy household, had been carefully polished by that lifestyle. She carried an effortless elegance that came from being surrounded by money and comfort. That only deepened the resentment in Sophia's gaze. That day, Sophia asked 3 questions. How long have you been married? Has he touched you? Do you kiss? Olivia knew exactly what Sophia wanted to hear. She told her that during the first year of marriage, he hadn't touched her. She said they didn't kiss. Sophia's tense posture relaxed instantly. A victorious smile spread across her face. But Olivia had lied. Alexander didn't dislike kissing, especially in bed. He liked watching her grow breathless under his kisses, the corners of her eyes reddening as she clung to him and begged him to stop. It gave him a sense of absolute control. There wasn't much affection in those moments. But sometimes, in the midst of that closeness, Olivia would briefly fool herself into thinking they were just an ordinary married couple. You see, women are often moved by these tiny, insignificant details, and then willingly give their hearts to a warmth that was never real. Now, Sophia stood there in the latest Chanel suit of the season, carrying a limited edition Hermes bag. Her flawless makeup masked every trace of fatigue. She looked at Olivia the way someone looks at an ant they're about to crush. Miss Shin, she said sweetly, her voice dripping with syrup, long time no see. I heard you're pregnant again. How wonderful. Congratulations. That single word, asterisk again asterisk, pierced Olivia like a needle. Olivia said nothing. She simply handed Jason the sealed bag she was holding. Inside was the hair sample she had prepared in advance, Ethan's. When they finished drawing blood and walked out of the clinic, a cold drizzle had begun. The icy rain hit her face, making her inexplicably irritated. The familiar black Bentley was parked at the curb. Alexander leaned against the car door, a cigarette between his fingers. The ember glowed red in the gray afternoon, flickering in and out. After waiting so long, impatience had begun to show on his face. It had only been a month since the divorce. He looked exactly the same. But Olivia felt as though she had lived half a lifetime since then. She tried to slip away unnoticed. But in the next second, his gaze locked onto her with perfect precision. Seems the last lesson wasn't enough, he said, exhaling a ring of smoke as his eyes drifted briefly over her abdomen. You think you can use the same trick again just to disgust me? You're mistaken, Olivia said. He crushed the cigarette beneath his shoe and began walking toward her. Mistaken? The timing, the motive, you've got every detail covered. And now you're telling me it's a misunderstanding? His dress shoes struck the wet pavement with dull thuds, each step sounding like it landed directly on her heart. Less than 3 months after divorcing me, you're 8 weeks pregnant, he continued coldly. Tell me, what kind of man made you forget your identity so quickly? Forget the agreement between us? The cruelty of his words, and the arrogance behind his assumptions, left Olivia momentarily speechless. She took a deep breath and lifted her head, meeting his gaze directly for the first time. Alexander, she said quietly, do you really think my life has no possibilities beyond you? She held his eyes. Finding someone I love, getting married, having a child that belongs to both of us, that was always part of my plan. The test results aren't even out yet. What gives you the right to condemn me already? A sheen of moisture welled up in her eyes as she asked him stubbornly, why won't you believe me even once, Alexander? He looked at her silently. The coldness in his eyes didn't soften in the slightest. Only when a drop of cold rain slid down her cheek did the fingers at his side twitch almost imperceptibly. He looked away, his lips pressed into a rigid line. Playing vulnerable, this trick seemed to work on him every time. After 3 years together, she had learned what got through to him. He stepped back, putting some distance between them. A moment later, he looked at her again, his voice edged with warning. You'd better make sure everything you said is true. Of course, Olivia replied. The report will be out in a week. You'll get the answer you want. She turned and left. What she didn't know was that Alexander kept staring at her retreating figure. A strange irritation suddenly surged in his chest. Was the child his? Or wasn't it? He realized that, strangely enough, neither answer seemed satisfying. Why? Even he couldn't explain it. On the way home, Olivia's mood stayed low. She pushed open the door to her apartment. The place was dark. Ethan hadn't returned yet. He was a surgeon at New York Presbyterian Hospital, constantly buried in work. They had met at a medical conference. He had been an invited specialist, while she had attended as Alexander's wife. He was the first person she had met who didn't treat her differently because of the title Mrs. Stone. He was gentle, polite, with clear, sincere eyes. Talking to him had always felt easy. After the divorce, she moved out of the cold Long Island villa and rented this small apartment in Manhattan. By coincidence, Ethan lived next door. Over time, they had grown close. Olivia turned on the living room light. Warm light filled the space, driving away the chill. On the table sat a bouquet of fresh sunflowers. A note was tucked beneath it. Olivia, an emergency surgery came up tonight, so I might be home late. I made your favorite, pickled cabbage fish. Make sure you eat it while it's hot. Ethan ***. His handwriting was neat and strong. Olivia picked up the note, warmth spreading through her chest. The fragrance of the fish dish mixed with the fresh scent of the sunflowers, pulling the unpleasant encounter from earlier that day back into her mind. During the 3 years she had spent with Alexander, what she ate most often were expensive but flavorless health meals. Because he disliked strong flavors, the kitchen in the Long Island villa didn't even have a bottle of chili sauce. She had once thought the rest of her life would pass in that dull, tasteless existence. Until she met Ethan. He remembered every casual preference she mentioned. He dragged her out to explore Brooklyn night markets, ate street food with her, and reminded her that life wasn't just about interests and calculations. There were countless small, beautiful moments too. Olivia pinched her palm lightly. She couldn't turn back now. She had escaped that magnificent cage. She absolutely couldn't let anyone, or anything, from her past drag her back into that abyss. A week later, the test results came out. Following Jason's instructions, Olivia went to a restaurant in Tribeca that they used to frequent. Sophia was already waiting in the private room, looking unusually relaxed. Olivia reached out to pick up the report, the document that supposedly determined her fate, but Jason pressed a hand over hers. Since Miss Shen is so confident, he said, why don't we let Miss Sophia reveal the result for us? Olivia's heart skipped. A bad feeling crept over her. The smile at the corner of Sophia's lips could no longer be concealed. Like a victorious general savoring the final struggle of a defeated enemy, she slowly opened the report. She glanced at it once, then slapped it down on the table. Miss Shen. Alexander hates deception more than anything, especially when it comes to children. Olivia's eyes fell on the report. In bold letters it read clearly, based on DNA analysis, Alexander Stone is confirmed to be the biological father of the tested male child, with a probability of 99%. Her breathing paused for a moment. Jason, sensing the tension, quietly left the room, leaving Olivia and Sophia alone. For a brief second Olivia seemed dazed. Then she picked up the report and calmly read it again. Seeing her like this, Sophia assumed she was making a final, desperate attempt to hold on. The smug smile on her face spread wider and wider. Why so quiet now? Sophia mocked. Miss Shen, trying to figure out how to cover your lie? I understand wanting to marry into wealth, but Alexander and I are getting engaged soon. Pulling a stunt like this, who exactly are you trying to disgust? Olivia quickly pieced it together. No wonder Sophia seemed so confident today. She had already dug the trap and was simply waiting for Olivia to fall into it. Perhaps Olivia had been too obedient during her 3 years with the Stone family, making Sophia think she was someone easy to manipulate. Unfortunately for her, before marrying Alexander, Olivia had spent years working with her father in business. She had seen plenty of dirty tricks. The samples today had been collected entirely under Sophia and Jason's watch. Looking back now, it would have been easy for them to tamper with things, just enough to swap out the sample she had brought. Olivia gently placed the report back on the table. There was even a hint of pity in her eyes. Sophia, she said quietly, you're really afraid of me. The smile on Sophia's face froze instantly. Olivia leaned forward slightly, closer to her. Every word came out slow and clear. Deep down, you know better than anyone that this child can't possibly be Alexander's. But you insist on making it look like it is. Am I right? Sophia's pupils widened like a startled cat's, though she tried to maintain her composure. What nonsense are you talking about? You went to all this trouble just so Alexander could see this so-called proof with his own eyes, didn't you? Olivia continued calmly. So he would completely believe that I, Olivia, am a woman who would do anything to cling to power and wealth. That way he'll tear apart the last bit of dignity I have left, and whatever little sentiment remains from our 3 years together will finally turn into disgust and hatred. Sophia's face turned visibly pale with anger, her voice rising sharply. I have no idea what crazy nonsense you're talking about. The curve of Olivia's smile grew wider as she mercilessly exposed Sophia's carefully crafted scheme. You want him to push me away with his own hands, preferably cut off all contact forever. That way there's no chance of trouble in the future. Because you know better than anyone that Alexander despises anything involving messy bloodlines and values nothing more than legitimacy. So you've given him the one reason he'll never forgive me. That was the truth. Sophia's greatest fear had never been the child in Olivia's womb. It was the lingering uncertainty of Alexander's feelings. She had to personally snuff out that final spark. 3 years of marriage, day and night together, was far more solid than those distant memories of youthful romance. How could she not fear that? Sophia suddenly stood up and slammed her palm onto the table, making the report jump. She decided to drop all pretense. Right now, this is the truth. I've already sent the report to Alexander. He'll believe this and nothing else. No matter how beautifully you talk, in his eyes you're just a lying clown. Olivia laughed lightly, leaning back into the soft sofa. And you really think, she asked calmly, your position in his heart is that unshakable? That was 3 years, Sophia, she continued. 3 years that no trick of yours can erase. Sophia was completely enraged now, every word dripping with venom. You're the one who was never loved. Get that straight. So what if it was 3 years? If I hadn't left back then, do you think the title of Mrs. Stone would ever have fallen to some washed-up nobody like you? She sneered. You got to enjoy 3 years of luxury as a rich man's wife. Did you really start to forget what you are? Olivia didn't respond. She tilted her head slightly, looking at Sophia with open mockery in her eyes. What? Jealous? Sophia let out a sharp, cold laugh. Jealous? What would I possibly be jealous of? To him, you were nothing more than a tool, someone to satisfy his physical needs and keep his family appeased. Oh, right, didn't you get pregnant with his child once before? Did you see him keep it? And as for this one, she suddenly thrust a finger forward. Her crimson-painted nail nearly jabbed Olivia's stomach, her face twisted with naked malice. What makes you think the outcome will be any different? I'll tell you something, even if this really were Alexander's child, giving birth to it wouldn't change your lowly background. The kid would end up just like you, spending his whole life being whispered about behind his back. An illegitimate nobody who'll never belong anywhere. Olivia's expression finally darkened completely. The calm mask she had been maintaining shattered. She shot to her feet, grabbed the freshly refilled glass of lemonade beside her, and flung it straight at Sophia's face. The door opened at that exact moment. Alexander walked in. The first thing he saw was Sophia, her face dripping with water, hair disheveled, looking like someone who had suffered a terrible injustice. He didn't even need to think. The conclusion formed instantly. His handsome face remained expressionless. He picked up the half-full decanter of red wine from the table, walked over to Olivia, and poured it over her head. Not a drop missed. The movement was smooth, decisive, without a hint of hesitation. Are you done making a scene? His voice was flat, no anger, no emotion, yet laced with a chilling coldness. The icy liquid ran down Olivia's hair, along her cheeks, soaking into her cashmere sweater. The red wine left her looking like someone who had just crawled out of a crime scene. The cold seeped into her bones, making her tremble uncontrollably. She closed her eyes for a moment, dazed. For a split second, it felt like she had been thrown back 3 years, shortly after their wedding. In another restaurant like this one, when he was hosting an important business partner. She had been nervous and accidentally spilled wine on the man's trousers while pouring. Alexander had stood up just like this, expressionless, and in front of an entire table of guests poured a full glass of whiskey over her head. Then, in the same indifferent tone, he had said, "What are you standing there for? Apologize to Mr. Smith." But this time was different. Now, she felt no grievance. No resentment. Only something bitterly ridiculous. So ridiculous that tears almost spilled from the corners of her eyes. She forced herself to swallow the burning in her throat and looked up at him. Her voice trembled slightly from the cold as she spoke slowly, stating a truth she had long since accepted. Alexander, I've never done anything to betray you. For 3 years, I did everything you asked. Whatever you told me to do, I did it. Even if it meant delivering hangover soup to your friends at 3 in the morning, I never complained. You told me to entertain your business partners, so I did, even when their looks and words were inappropriate. I smiled and endured it. You told me to abort that child, and I did. Even when the doctor warned that I might never be able to conceive again. Wasn't that enough, Alexander? Her eyes had finally reddened. So why did you treat me like this? His gaze darkened. He said nothing, only stared at her. Olivia forced out a crooked smile that looked worse than crying. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. I was always obedient. I never caused you trouble. When we divorced, I left with nothing. I didn't ask you for a single cent. I cut off every possible connection to you. She swallowed hard. I even, sincerely hoped you'd be happy. Her throat tightened so badly she couldn't finish the sentence. She just stared stubbornly at him, like a fool demanding an answer. Why did you treat me like this, Alexander? During those 3 years, she rarely cried in front of him. He didn't like it. In his dark eyes, her miserable reflection stared back. Hot tears slid down her cheeks. At his side, his fingers slowly curled into fists. When he had lifted the decanter moments ago, the movement had been decisive. Now his hand felt unbearably heavy, he could barely move it. He had presided over countless meetings that determined the fate of his entire company. Yet at this moment, for the first time, he didn't know what to say. His cold gaze remained fixed on the tears on her face, unable to move away. His silence became the final straw that broke her. Olivia's voice suddenly rose. Why? Why do all of you keep interfering in my life? Why do you just assume this child must be yours? Why do you have to push me to this point? He finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Because the night before our divorce, we slept together. Beside them, Sophia, still covering her face, suddenly looked up in shock. She had probably never imagined that on the very night she returned to the country, while she waited happily for Alexander to pick her up at the airport, he had spent the entire night tangled in bed with Olivia. Sophia's face turned ghostly pale. She swayed slightly, lips trembling as if she wanted to say something. Alexander didn't even glance at her. His gaze remained locked on Olivia. Olivia suddenly laughed. But her tears fell even faster. So that's the reason? Alexander, we were married for 3 years. On how many nights didn't we sleep together? The number of times you refused to use protection, 10 fingers wouldn't be enough to count them. I took the pills every single time. Not once did I miss it. Nothing happened for years. So what makes you so sure that that one time would get me pregnant? His jaw tightened. He flung the report onto the table in front of her. Then explain this. That's fake, she shouted. The private room fell into a deathly silence. They stood on opposite sides of the table, the air so heavy it was hard to breathe. The first person to calm down was Olivia. Alexander, don't you remember what the doctor said? She asked quietly. The tears in her eyes gradually receded, leaving only exhaustion and sadness. After I lost that child, it would be very difficult for me to get pregnant again. His expression turned glacial. But you are pregnant now. That's because my fiancé is a doctor, she finally said, the words leaving her completely drained. Alexander, I took medication every time afterward. That night included. You would never allow accidents, would you? And I wanted one even less. But Alexander, what are you doing right now? Those words snapped him back to reality. Yes. What was he doing? Olivia stood there with her hair dripping wet, almost pleading. Alexander, please. Just this once. Every emotion in her eyes was painfully clear to him. Clear enough to make him uneasy. But she wasn't asking him to believe her. She said quietly, Alexander, let me go. 5 simple words. They fell as lightly as feathers, but in his ears they weighed like mountains. His chest ached so sharply he could barely breathe. At that moment, the door to the private room was pushed open from the outside. Olivia? A man's anxious voice rang out. Olivia turned her head and saw Ethan standing at the door, still wearing his white lab coat. He had clearly rushed straight from the hospital. The moment he saw her, soaked through, tear-streaked, his anxiety vanished, replaced by deep concern and anger. He strode in quickly, shrugged off his lab coat, and wrapped it firmly around her shoulders, blocking Alexander's cold gaze. What happened? How did you end up like this? He gently wiped her face with his sleeve as he spoke, his voice low and full of worry. Olivia shook her head, unable to say a single word. She simply buried her face in Ethan's lab coat, breathing in the faint scent of disinfectant and drawing comfort from the warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan's gaze moved past the top of her head. He glanced at the paternity report on the table, then at Alexander. His expression was calm, but there was the unmistakable scrutiny of a doctor in his eyes. Alexander, we've already contacted the police, Ethan said. His voice wasn't loud, but every person in the room heard it clearly. Olivia texted me this afternoon saying she was coming to meet you. After my surgery, I couldn't reach her on the phone, and her location showed she'd been here the whole time. I've already informed the restaurant manager and asked them to pull the surveillance footage. He paused, pulling Olivia a little closer into his arms. His tone turned colder. I'm sure the footage will clearly show what happened here today, who started it, and who falsified this ridiculous report. Alexander's pupils shrank sharply. Beside him, Sophia had already turned completely pale at the words police and surveillance. Her body began trembling uncontrollably. Ethan, she tried to speak, but Ethan stopped her with a single look. Sophia, Ethan said, adjusting the glasses on the bridge of his nose. His eyes behind the lenses were sharp. As a doctor, I should remind you that defamation and falsifying medical reports both carry legal consequences. Especially when the person you're targeting is a pregnant woman. He lowered his head and gently patted Olivia's back, his voice soft again. Olivia, let's go home. Olivia nodded. In his arms, she felt the cold that had seeped into her bones finally begin to fade. From beginning to end, Alexander didn't say another word. He simply stood there, watching Ethan hold Olivia as they walked out of the suffocating private room step by step. Her husband, no, her ex-husband, the man who had always stood above everything, controlling everything, was now completely shut out of her world like an outsider. When they reached the restaurant entrance, the cold wind made Olivia shiver. Ethan quickly helped her into his car and turned the heat up to the maximum. "Why didn't you tell me they asked you to meet here?" he said, a hint of reproach in his voice. Leaning against the passenger seat, Olivia watched him circle around to the driver's side. He was only wearing a thin shirt now, which made her feel a little guilty. "I thought I could handle it." He sighed, starting the car but not driving off right away. Instead, he grabbed a clean blanket from the back seat and draped it over her. "Don't do this again. You're not alone anymore. Why try to tough it out by yourself?" Looking at his focused profile as he drove, Olivia felt her nose sting. She wanted to cry again. "Hey, don't cry," he said as if he had eyes in the back of his head. He pulled a pack of tissues from the compartment and handed it to her. "If you keep crying, the baby's going to laugh at you. When we get home I'll make you some ginger soup, and your favorite sweet and sour ribs, okay?" "Okay," she murmured. The car merged smoothly into traffic, leaving the upscale restaurant, and the people inside it, far behind. Olivia knew Ethan's talk about the police and surveillance had probably been a bluff. Restaurants of that level protected the privacy of their private rooms very strictly. There wouldn't be cameras inside. But he had bet on Sophia's guilty conscience, and on Alexander hesitating in that moment. And he had won. Meanwhile, Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the private room, watching the white Volvo disappear into the night. It was an ordinary car, nothing compared to any vehicle in his garage. Yet that car had taken away the woman who once belonged to him. Slowly, he picked up the DNA report soaked in red wine. The ink had blurred slightly, but the 99% asterisk still stood out harshly. He remembered Ethan's words. Asterisk falsified this ridiculous report. Asterisk Jason, he said. Jason stepped in quietly. "Yes, Mr. Stone? Where's Sophia? I had someone take her home." Alexander was silent for a moment before speaking again. "Tell her to get lost. And notify the legal department of Stone Group. Terminate all cooperation with the Chen family." Jason froze briefly, then nodded quickly. "Understood. And another thing." Alexander lit a cigarette and took a deep drag. "Investigate that private clinic. And arrange another paternity test. As soon as possible." Through the curling smoke, he began, perhaps for the first time, to wonder if he had been completely wrong these past 3 years. He had always thought Olivia was gentle, harmless. That whenever he wanted, he could close his hand and keep her firmly within his grasp. But he had forgotten. Even a rabbit would bite if cornered. And Olivia had never been a rabbit. She had only hidden her sharp edges and brilliance, for him. Now she was showing that gentleness to another man. On the way home, Ethan received a call from the hospital. An emergency patient had arrived in critical condition, and he needed to return immediately. After hanging up, he looked apologetic. "Olivia, I need to go back to the hospital first." "It's okay, go ahead. Work comes first," she said lightly, waving her hand. Still worried, he pulled the car over and reminded her again and again. "Take a hot shower as soon as you get home. The ginger soup is in the thermos, remember to drink it. I ordered dinner delivery, it should arrive soon. If you feel uncomfortable at all, call me immediately." "I know, Ethan. You're more nagging than my mom," she teased. He finally shook his head helplessly, called a ride for her, and only left after making sure she got into the car safely. Olivia returned to the apartment alone. After showering and drinking the ginger soup, she felt revived. The delivery arrived right on time, her favorite Sichuan restaurant. She sat under the warm lights, slowly eating her meal, though her mind refused to settle. Not long after she left the restaurant earlier, Jason had driven over. "Mr. Stone, we've confirmed everything," Jason said, handing over a new file. "Sophia bribed a nurse at the clinic to swap your sample with Dr. Ethan's." Inside the file were several photos, Sophia meeting the nurse at a cafe in Brooklyn. Alexander flipped through the pages expressionlessly, though the veins on the back of his hand bulged one by one. "Where is she? I've had someone bring her over." "She's in the car." Alexander opened the door and got in. The moment Sophia saw him, she burst into tears. "Alexander, please listen to me. I didn't mean to do it. I was just so afraid of losing you. I love you so much." Alexander didn't even spare her a glance. He simply threw the file at her face. Get out. Just one word. Sophia froze. After 10 years of waiting and so much scheming, the only thing she received in return was that single word. Alexander, you can't treat me like this, Jason, Alexander interrupted coldly. Take her away. Send her where she belongs. 2 bodyguards dragged Sophia out of the car. She screamed and cursed hysterically, but the noise quickly vanished once the door closed. Silence returned. Jason glanced nervously at his boss's storm-dark face in the rearview mirror, hardly daring to breathe. After a long time, Alexander spoke again, his voice heavy with fatigue. Look into the hospital where Olivia had that surgery back then. Pull all the medical records and operation reports. Suddenly he wanted to know what the child he had personally forced her to lose had taken from her. Her health? Or the heart that had once loved him? The results came back quickly. Jason placed a thick stack of medical records on Alexander's desk. Mr. Stone, Jason said quietly, Olivia's surgery back then caused severe uterine adhesions. Her attending physician said that her chances of conceiving naturally were almost zero. Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he held the medical file. Then now, Dr. Ethan is a specialist in this field, Jason continued in a low voice. He personally performed a hysteroscopic adhesion separation surgery for Olivia, and then treated her for more than half a year before. Jason didn't dare finish the sentence. The office fell into a death-like silence. Outside the window, the sky slowly darkened as the city lights flickered on one by one. Alexander remained sitting there without moving until the darkness seemed to swallow him whole. He remembered something Olivia had said. Find someone you love, get married, and have a child that belongs to the 2 of you. It turned out that in her life plans, he had already been erased. When she was at her most painful and desperate, the one who stayed by her side and healed her had been another man. He hadn't just lost his wife, he had also lost a child that might have been his. Almost unconsciously, he picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. The phone rang for a long time before someone answered. Hello? It was Ethan's voice. In the background, Olivia's laughter could be heard. They were talking about baby names. At that moment, Alexander felt as if a hand had crushed his heart. He said nothing. He simply hung up. He realized that in this lifetime, he probably would never have a child. And there would never again be a woman named Olivia leaving a light on for him late at night. When I think about this story, a sentence comes to mind. Some people only understand what they once had after they've already lost it. But what's the use of understanding then? Some things, once gone, never come back. Olivia spent 3 years trying to exchange obedience and patience for a little bit of care. But Alexander never truly saw her. In his eyes, she was only a tool, a chess piece, something he could move and discard at will. Only when she was truly gone far away, gone into someone else's life, did he realize that he, too, could feel pain. But what did it matter now? She no longer cared. Sophia was the same. She schemed for 10 years, believing she would finally get what she wanted. But she forgot something. Things gained through manipulation are never truly yours. She tried every trick to tie a man to herself, without realizing that he had never really belonged to her. The person in his heart had always been the one he pushed away with his own hands. This story makes me think of one word, being seen. In a relationship, the most frightening thing isn't arguments or even betrayal. It's not being seen. Your efforts go unnoticed. Your pain goes unnoticed. Even your very existence goes unnoticed. You live in someone's world, yet you're as invisible as air. The question Olivia asked at the end stayed with me for a long time. She said, I was always obedient. I never caused you trouble. When we divorced, I left with nothing. I didn't ask you for a single penny and cut off all contact with you. I even sincerely hoped you would be happy. So why did you treat me like this? Why indeed? Because he never truly saw her. The Olivia he saw was only the version in his imagination, a manipulative woman who would use a child to trap him. He never considered that maybe she simply wanted a peaceful life, with someone who truly loved her. So when the truth finally came out, when he finally saw who she really was, it was already too late. The woman who once left a light on for him every night had gone to leave that light on for someone else. Marriage is not the end. Neither is divorce. Olivia's story reminds us that sometimes ending a bad relationship is the true beginning of a new life. She lost someone who didn't love her, but she met someone who truly understood her. She lost one child, but gained another. Fate can be cruel, but it can also be fair. Sometimes it takes things away, but it also gives something back. The real question is whether you're willing to let go, and whether you're brave enough to start again. Olivia let go. So she gained something new. Alexander refused to let go. So he lost everything. Sophia too, she schemed desperately to hold on, and ended up with empty hands. So if you're in a relationship where you feel unseen, ask yourself, do you really want to keep waiting? How many more years will you spend hoping someone who never looks back will finally see you? Marriage isn't the ending. Happiness is. Whether you're married, divorced, or single, you deserve to be truly seen and genuinely loved. That's all for today's story. If you have a story you'd like to share, feel free to leave a comment or send me a message. This is Marriage is Not the End. See you next time.